So my name's Jennifer Goodman. I'm the director of the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance. Great to have you in a virtual gathering with us today. You know the Preservation Alliance, we're the statewide historic preservation nonprofit. This gathering is part of our ongoing and expanding set of workshops, educational sessions designed to provide people like you with practical information, inspiration, connections, and referrals. Sorry not to be in person, but glad we can provide things this way. We've done about a dozen topics since or more now, since the beginning of the COVID crisis. We've seen some nice results. I know some of you have been on those earlier sessions. I think we have drier basements and healthier homes and fixed up homes around the state because of some of the old house and barn programs we've run. I think we've helped folks start or restart on fundraising campaigns for their critical community landmark. Above all, I hope we've given people some new ideas, some new energy and connections to get this important preservation work done. Wanted to thank all of you who are members and supporters. If you're not yet, please consider a donation. If you're already a donor, consider a gift membership, a special gift in honor of somebody. I think you all know we're very much open for business, providing lots kind of expanding assistance across the state. Even a little bit makes a big difference, and we really count on you. Most of our dollars for operations comes from people like you. Wanted you to know I'm recording this session because we are sharing these afterwards with folks like you who missed the session or want to learn more on these different topics. I would ask that everybody mute audio. And I'll describe how it's going to work, but we'll unmute you when you have a question or suggestion later on in the session. It's so great for this topic about community preservation planning and some of the classic tools to have two great colleagues from the Division of Historical Resources. We have Megan Rupnik, who's the state survey coordinator with us today from the Division of Historical Resources, as well as her colleague, Brandee Loughlin, who runs the National Register and Preservation Tax Incentive programs there at the division. We also have special guest Mae Williams, who's a preservation consultant. Some of you have probably worked with her already. Glad to have her on in this session. And two of my colleagues have joined us. One you can see, one you can't. Beverly Thomas is here with us, who's our program director, runs a lot of helps our old house and barn constituents, as well as does a lot of other things. And Maggie Steer, who's working with us on a set of capacity building projects for the Preservation Alliance. Both of them are great Preservation Alliance colleagues and also very active in their local communities. Wolfboro for Maggie and Bedford for Beverly. So, and I could introduce all of you, but I won't. I would just kind of set the stage by saying we've got a great mix of people. We have Historic District Commission members, Heritage Commission members, Historical Society board members and members, people who are working either on their own house or another great building in town or across the state. And we do have across the state, as I was saying during the warm-up as we were waiting to start, we've got great geographic diversity of you, of the attendees in this session. And I guess I would say, when I look at who's on the call, again, just to set the stage, I think, I'm assuming a lot of you, you're here for different reasons. There's people who have worked really hard on a save or a revitalization project in town and are now trying to kind of step back and say, what else could we be doing proactively? I think there's also folks here on this Zoom call that are concerned and thinking about how to use some of these tools to stop something they're worried about or redirect investment in town, kind of those kinds of themes about trying to shift course to have preservation investment happen in a way that's helping their community. So here's how we were going to design today, just together for about an hour. Megan's going to start us out with an overview with a few PowerPoint slides, walking us through the concepts of survey and inventory, state and national register. After that, Mae and I are just going to give you a couple of real life examples, and others can jump in at that point too. So if you have a idea to share kind of why you did something, who did it, how much it cost, why it was helpful short and long term related to survey, national register, state register. We welcome really short examples kind of in the middle of our program, and then we're going to open it up. And I think try to keep those questions kind of in those buckets of the kind of broader and survey and inventory questions, and then some of those more specific tools. So here we go. Ready to go? Megan, you want to take over?
We're going to do that.
All right, let's see here. We're going to do slideshow. There we go.
All right, so good afternoon, everybody. Brandee and I are going to go over a couple of our program areas. We're just going to begin with some very basic introduction of survey, the state register, and the national register programs, and to provide some common knowledge to start the conversation on the different program areas and preservation tools that we'll be discussing today. So survey is defined as the process of identifying historic properties that help tell the story of a community, documenting the physical appearance and condition of the properties in a systematic way. Depending on the level or depth of the survey, it may also entail evaluating the historical or architectural significance of properties, but placing them within a historic context. These properties could be buildings, such as houses, barns, commercial properties, structures, including bridges, windmills, water towers, objects, such as monuments or statuary, or historic districts. Traditionally, surveys typically result in two products. These include inventory forms and a survey report. At DHR, more creative approaches to survey we've seen more recently, with reports not laid out like a traditional survey report, but more to meet the needs of the community, Heritage Commission, or HDC. What you create from the act of surveying is called an inventory, which contains the information gained through the research and field observations about specific properties. Our office, like most state historic preservation offices, is tasked with keeping an inventory of the state's historic properties. For this purpose, we have created the DHR inventory form to collect the information in a consistent manner. In addition to this form, we've also developed a community survey form, which is an abbreviated version of our standard inventory form and is intended to be used for community survey. Using our forms ensures consistency of information and public accessibility once the survey project is complete. The forms both document the physical appearance and condition and history of the property. Next. Survey is the starting point for all preservation-related programs. You won't know what needs protected or preserved if you don't know what you have. What you produce from a survey will be an individual tool for historic preservation planning and contribute to New Hampshire's historic record. Survey can provide the foundation for community preservation planning and economic development, can lead to local ordinances and designation and state and national register nominations. Information gathered can also be used for educational programs such as a brochure or walking tour, and can result in a greater public awareness of historic preservation. Survey is the foundation for all preservation programs and is a proactive approach to preservation. However, before you begin a survey, it is important to identify what your goals of the survey are to help guide the survey and make it successful. Next, we're going to talk about the state register. So the state register is an honorary listing that was created in 2001, intended to recognize and encourage the protection of significant historic resources meaningful to New Hampshire residents. State register nominations are completed on our full inventory forms and are typically done by preservation professionals, local community members such as someone from a historical society or Heritage Commission, and by private property owners. The owner of the property has to consent to the listing. Listing provides a few benefits, but one of the main draws is that it opens up potential grant funding opportunities typically Moose Plate or L-chip grants from municipalities and nonprofits. Next slide. To list something to the state register, again, you need to complete a full inventory form. Once a draft of the form is submitted to our office, DHR's Determination of Eligibility Committee will review the form and evaluate it for state register eligibility. This committee meets twice a month. If the committee determines it is eligible, the next step is to receive property owner consent. Once the consent is received, the property will be included on the agenda for the upcoming State Historic Resources Council meeting, which is a governor-appointed board that evaluates and approves the listings for the state and or National Register nominations. They meet 4 times a year. If the State Historic Resource Council approves the state register nomination, the property is then officially listed to the New Hampshire State Register.
Okay, so when we're talking about survey, inventory, and documentation of your historic buildings, we're really looking at layers or levels of that. And the National Register is kind of almost the top level. Really the next more involved thing is a National Historic Landmark, and that's a whole other animal. But the National Register is kind of like the biggest level that most folks strive for. And the National Register was created as part of the National Historic Preservation Act in 1966. The National Register is actually managed by the National Park Service, although we at the State Historic Preservation offices are the go-betweens to administer the program at the state level, but we do work in partnership with the National Park Service, who are the final reviewers and deciders basically for that. The National Register is an official list of the historic properties recognized by the federal government. The process for the National Register is a little more complicated than the State Register, and certainly more complicated than just surveying. You can do an individual nomination, or you can do a district nomination. What you need to do first is complete the National Register nomination form, which is a fairly lengthy and technical form. Then our staff here at DHR will review that form for technical and substance type issues. The owners are notified prior to the listing, and then the State Historic Resources Council, the same board that looks at the state registers, reviews and recommends those for approval to the National Park Service. Then we send that document to the National Park Service, and they are the final approval for listing to the National Register. So benefits of designating historic properties, again, whether that's individual or districts. You know, the number one thing is recognition. That's what folks are often looking for, of the historic properties and their importance. But these are really planning tools when you get down to it. They really allow you to know what you have and be able to evaluate the things that you do have within the greater context of your town or neighborhood or whatever you're looking at. It also helps in qualifying preservation projects for grant assistance, as Megan mentioned. It's a resource for other folks for research and education. We all know how helpful our local historical societies are and libraries and things like that. And that's because people who came before us did reports and did research and put those all together. So if we continue to do those same things, then we can provide that for people in the future as well. It does give a little bit of consideration in planning under federal projects or federally assisted projects. That's the National Register. It's a little nuanced there. And then there are other federal tax benefits for income producing National Register properties. And that's a program that I oversee, and that's the Federal Rehabilitation Investment Tax Credit Program. So probably the most common of those that folks are most familiar with are like when mills are converted to apartments, things like that. So listing on the state and national registers does not provide you with some things that a lot of people often think that they do. So listing alone does not place restrictions on a property, and that includes remodeling, repairing, altering, selling, or demolishing. So no restrictions. It does not obligate an owner to make repairs or improvements to the property at all. And it doesn't prevent demolition, development, or provide protection against these activities, which a lot of folks often think is the case. But when it comes down to it, the state and national registers are just honorific, and they are those planning tools so that you know what to prioritize when perhaps something like this is happening in your community. You have some documentation on the significance of the building, and maybe that can help make your case if you have a local demolition delay ordinance or local historic district or something like that. All right. So that is the end of our presentation.
Thank you. So next we were just, as I said before, we were going to offer a couple of examples and then open it up to either other examples or questions about survey, National Register, State Register, and other related planning issues. So I was going to start with a townwide survey example and then kick it over to Mae. I think Mae is going to talk about a Center Harbor example that she worked on. My theme is that I've really enjoyed being part of survey projects that were kind of a hybrid and used an expert consultant and also used volunteers. And I'm going to talk a little bit about one of those. It's based in Lyme, New Hampshire, over on the Connecticut. The community had a really strong historical society over time, a really strong conservation ethic. But I think at one point a few years ago, everybody kind of looked at each other and said, we need more of a proactive heritage effort, preservation effort as well. So they actually gave themselves a heritage commission. They voted in a heritage commission, one of the municipal-wide advisory and education and planning instruments, a heritage commission. They gave it to them as a birthday present for themselves on a major anniversary. I think it was the town's 250th. And they really, from the beginning, felt that they needed to do townwide survey for the reasons that Megan just described, to have an inventory, to know what to focus on, to document what was there, and to plan other activities around. I think they were also motivated by some losses of historic structures that were occurring, and I think even more so kind of remodeling. People who were living in old properties but not understanding their architectural significance, their character defining features, things like that. So, so the Heritage Commission did private fundraising to pay for their survey work. That was, I don't know the precise amount, but it was definitely over $10,000. It was a major project, lots of different buildings being surveyed. And a side note is that I worked in cities before coming to New Hampshire 20 years ago and saw great examples of even neighborhoods in lower socioeconomic status doing inventory and National Register nominations and things like that, and fundraising within the district and being successful. So anyways, Lyme was an example of paying for their survey with private dollars. And volunteers, sort of this nice collaboration where they hired a preservation consultant like Mae. They hired Elizabeth Durfee-Hangen, and then volunteers in some of Liz's projects have helped with specific things like deed research, driving her around, compilation of materials at the end. So it's not only that they've saved some money, but it was a nice engagement design to sort of get that band of people that much closer to the action. So they've been using their survey in different ways. I think short term, it gave them the sense that they knew more about what they had and they could plan future historic commission activities around what they knew that they now have. Certainly long term, they're using the material to educate property owners and citizens of the town in different ways. They created a book out of the survey, which has been very, very popular. I even learned that at the town office, when somebody buys a house in the area, and right now they're having a lot of pressure from out-of-town buyers, there's a welcome packet that the new owner, the new resident of Lyme gets that includes historic information about their house, which I thought was pretty cool. So nice long and short-term benefits. done for kind of the classic reasons, reacting to some problems, but also wanting to be proactive and privately funded. So that's my Lyme example. May, I'll shift it over to you.
All right, so in 2016 and 2017, I believe, I worked with the town of Santa Harbor, which is actually where I live, so it was really convenient for me, to do a townwide survey that was funded by a Hurricane Sandy grant, actually from DHR. So the grant was to create a survey methodology that would have local volunteers gathering a lot of the information and feeding it directly to a consultant who would do some of the overall report writing from that information, and as an effort to do some cost saving. So Santa Harbor hadn't really had any comprehensive survey work ever. In the early 1980s, there was some work done for the town's first master plan, but in the ensuing 40 years, there was almost nothing. So people didn't really know what they had. And of the buildings that were surveyed in, I think it was 1983, a bunch of them had been lost. And more of them had been really significantly altered. So the idea with the grant was to look at what buildings local people thought were important, and structures that local people thought were important. Look at kind of the demographics of where they are and what those stories are, and where those buildings are at, whether they've changed a lot, whether they haven't changed a lot. And then look at those against town mapping, the current town master plan, and hazard mitigation plans. So in Santa Harbor, we have a lot of seasonal properties, for instance, that are on seasonally maintained roads. So if one of those buildings catches fire in February, it's kind of a loss. So those were kind of high risk properties. We also looked at places that were high risk for development, and tried to kind of figure out where the most important properties were, where the most hazardous areas were, and then kind of take those two maps and overlay them to figure out where the Heritage Commission should put their efforts into education, preservation, and additional survey work. So it was a really interesting project to work on. It was, the results ended up actually being overlaid into the town GIS mapping. We used the community survey forms from DHR that Megan mentioned earlier. So those were conducted for, I think it was 120 properties at the time, and I think now it's up to 150 because they've kept going with the project. But the GIS map, if you click on, you know, a property in the town, not only do you get the tax information, but you also get the historic information, which is varying degrees depending on who did the research and how much time they put into it. But it's really interesting. So it's all out there for anybody, and I think it's been a really, really useful tool for education in the town, and made a lot more people aware of what we have.
That's great. Thanks, May. Can you give us a range of the cost of that project? I know it had a lot of different pieces.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking there were some state register nominations in town after.
Yeah. That was actually before.
Oh, before.
So it started, nothing had been done in Santa Harbor at all since the early 80s. They had a National Register District in the early 80s. And then at that point, Lakes Region Planning Commission was paying for things. And then Lakes Region Planning Commission stopped paying for survey work, so it stopped happening. So in, I think it was 2014 and 2015, I did state register nominations for 2 properties in town, and the cost for those were very, very low, partially because I was still in school getting my master's during that. So there was that aspect of it. And then the DHR project, I think it was only like, it was about $6,000 or something like that. And that included developing the survey manual for how to do it. And then also the report that I wrote that went with all those individual inventory forms. And that was paid entirely by the federal government because of that, that grant source. Quite honestly, I ended up doing a lot of volunteer work as part of that. So it was a lot less money than it really, the amount of work it was. So I don't know that that's a really fair estimate for how much it cost.
Yeah. I think people will want to know the range. So, I mean, I think you could hire somebody, a consultant to help with a couple days on a nomination. Maybe if you had somebody from the Historical Society or yourself working on a state register nomination, might be hundreds or a couple thousands. If you have a huge National Register district or a huge survey area, you could be talking 20,000 or more dollars if it was, you know, lots and lots of buildings and lots of travel and time and research. Is that a fair range?
Yeah, I think so. And as a consultant, the more information and good information you can feed a consultant, the better value you're going to get out of what they produce. So, you know, if I'm working on a building completely starting from scratch, you know, it's going to cost, and it's a complex building, it's going to cost a lot more than a building where someone hands me all, you know, gives me a pile of books at the beginning with a bunch of photographs and says, okay, you know, here's where we found this, here's where we found this, here are our sources, and I don't have to go start from scratch and do that all over. So, you know, I've done state and national register nominations for as low as like $1,500, and then sometimes they're more like 5 or 10, depending on how complex it is and where you're starting from. So the more legwork you can do before you get a consultant involved, the more cost effective it'll be for you.
So that's great advice, and thanks for the range. And also embedded in that, I'm hearing, you know, be clear about your goals. You can do these things in different order, survey, state register, whatever. There's a logical progression if you've done survey that then you could do districts or individual properties for the state or national register, but sometimes it happens the other way. I've also seen on these the projects with volunteers, just being realistic about what you can take on and how much momentum you can keep to be doing this, what can be detailed and complicated work as volunteers. So did anybody else, before we open it up for questions, have a example that they'd like to share of survey, state register, national register that they've already completed and just wanted to share a little bit about the mechanics, what the goals were, how it's been useful? Christina or anybody? No, you're not on. It's not a test and you don't have to do it. Okay. Well, let's open it up then. I think I can see everybody. So if you just put your hand up or did something in the chat box, that would be helpful. And I think I want to stay with that order that our DHR colleagues suggested and start with questions or suggestions about the basic survey and inventory, and then move to state register and then national register. So any takers on survey questions? You're thinking about it or? Okay, I'm gonna turn to Anne first and then Wendy. Anne, can you unmute yourself? Anne's from Harrisville. You've got a lot of research done in Harrisville already.
I have a question about survey results. When do you need to do condition? Can you just do architectural features?
That's a good question, or I'd restate it to say, to what extent from the DHR perspective would you include information on building condition in your official programs?
You would include it as part of the description. It would just be kind of current condition of the building.
Is it necessary to have condition or is it optional?
I mean, I would think it would kind of come up in the description of the building. When you're describing the building in its current presence, I would imagine the condition of it would sort of come up. You don't want to be, I mean, you want to be objective when you describe the building. You don't want to go on and on about what terrible condition it's in, because it's a public record, so you have to be careful about your wording. But you can describe it to a degree. It's conditioned to a degree in the description.
So
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be as simple as, the building is in fair condition. It has some peeling paint, a couple of broken window, that kind of
Yeah.
basic physical.
You are looking for that then. You're looking for condition.
Excuse
When
me?
you get these inventory reports, you do want to see something about condition.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Wendy, did you have a survey related question or recommendation? You're in Wyndham. Wyndham? Yeah.
Really, I'm not sure it's exactly survey related, but it was a question for Mae about what she was saying with the GIS. And that, so like our GIS, it has the vision property card and a couple photos in it. You said that there was something historic that you added for some of the buildings. Is that separate from the vision property card? Like you made something else and the town agreed to put in this, like, is it a photo? Is it a description? What was it?
So I'm going to kick it to Mae, and then maybe DHR, you could talk just about how people access survey information at DHR. Go, Mae.
All right, so what they ended up doing in Center Harbor was the town had all the individual inventory forms made into PDFs that were attached to each tax parcel. So when you click on the parcel, the vision card comes up and the photos come up, and a PDF, a link to a PDF also comes up.
Pretty great. People always ask about how to find out information on a property, or whether it's already considered eligible for the state or national register, whether it's ever been surveyed. Give us some information on that.
Usually, people can just send me an email or call our office, and if it's just one property here or there, I'm happy to look it up for people. Otherwise, we used to be, open to the public. You have to make an appointment to come in and look at our files, where you can actually see the hard copy of the inventory form. And then we now have all of our inventory scanned and available electronically through our online GIS system, Emmett, which is a subscription-based program.
But there are different rates depending on nonprofit, municipality, commercial use, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you for that. Anybody else? Survey related questions? Thinking about how to get started? Stuck in the middle of one? How about, let's shift to state register then.
Wendy has a question.
Wendy, you have a follow-up? Go for it.
I had, I'm not positive that my town ever officially did surveys. I know the state did surveys in 92 or 93 when they did the expansion of Loughlin that runs through the middle of my town. I don't know how much they did, but we have a historic cultural resource list. And what we've done is put all the houses that are historic in nature on that list. So we have some degree of awareness and control over properties that go to ZBA or planning board or anything like that, conservation. I don't really, is there a way that I can find out what we do have that was surveyed? Because you're talking like the state survey. That's the same thing that would have been done in 92 or 93. Is there a way to find out like what properties? I mean, it might be a big project, a big undertaking. I don't know if there's like an Excel sheet and it's just got the lot numbers or anything.
Depending on what was done back then, it sounds like it was probably surveyed for DOT or
Yes.
federal highway. Yeah, okay. It's likely that it was done on one of our survey forms. It's also likely that it's a very succinct survey form. And at this point, the information is pretty old. I mean, it's base information. That's good to have, but that would definitely be something that if it's on our inventory forms, it should have been scanned and mapped on our Emmett program.
Would it be like if you put it in Windham, New Hampshire, it just would pop up a bunch of stuff that was in
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I could, Jennifer, I could try to do a screen share and pull Emmett up if folks want to see a demonstration.
You don't have to do it now. You could do it
Okay.
later. It's up to you. I mean, I don't know
If we have time. Once we
Okay.
pull that pod and see if we
But
have,
yeah, it's all mapped. You would just put in an address or even just put in Windham, New Hampshire or whatever, and it would zoom in and you would see a bunch of dots or polygons depending on what has been surveyed, a district or a specific location. Yep.
that's great. So maybe we'll have time to do that. And definitely I'm going to send an email to all the participants afterwards that has links to DHR and Emmett and things like that. So it'll be easy to follow up after this session here together. I'm going to move away from survey if that's okay. Anybody have state register questions, ideas for the group? Has anybody done a nomination before? Nope. Oh, good. Yep. And
Actually, our building, the North Wilmot Church, is on the National Register and was placed there in 1989, so it precedes the state. And my question is, we'd like to also be included in the state register. I'm assuming that if you've made the cut for National Register, it would be, you could use the paperwork, or I don't know how to translate that information to a state register nomination.
great question. Brandee, do you want to take that?
Sure. That's actually pretty easy. What we would ask for is the first page of our inventory form to be filled out and then some updated photos. And I would be more than happy to work with you on that. And then I think we have the board just approve it, just to officially list it. And then we would also need consent of who's ever the listed, legally appointed representative of the owner to sign off. Did you say it was a town hall?
Meeting house.
Meeting house?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the oldest church structure in town, and I'm president of the organization, so I could probably sign that.
Okay, yeah, so we need owner consent, updated photographs, then just some brief information on the property, current information on the property. So I would just, reach out to me and we can get that started.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay.
Thanks for that question. Any other state register questions or suggestions, Barbara? Unmute.
No.
Nope. Do it again.
Got it?
Now we can.
Okay, got it? Okay, just to follow up on the earlier question, what is the additional advantage of being on the state register if your building is already on the national register?
That's a good question. Do you,
And you could get a state register plaque.
Yeah.
And you'll get a certificate and
Right.
you'll get a year membership to the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance.
Is there any advantage in terms of when an organization is grant seeking?
I don't think there's a huge advantage to it. I think it's still part of, the same point system.
Okay.
I could see it as slightly advantageous in the fact that by doing that, you can have press releases and kind of increase awareness of the property locally.
Yep.
So
There's
if you're
that too.
trying to raise a match or something like that, people are more aware of it.
Got it.
another recognition promotion opportunity. I agree. I think also back to the, concise or old survey information or old National Register nominations, it maybe also is an excuse to update your information, update your photography, make sure that your the information you have about significance, building evolution, building situation is as good as it can be at that point in time. But Not many people are doing that, I would say, in practice, but it, you know, if you have the interest and bandwidth, go for it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. National Register, districts or individual properties, or how it relates to the benefits. Anybody else? Wendy has a question. Wendy gets most questions award.
So I just found out that my town has a historic stone culvert. And Tanya sent me a thing that Jim Garvin had done about it, that they're automatically eligible for the National Register. So now I don't know what to do with it, because we just by accident found this thing. And I mean, it doesn't look like anything, you know, it kind of looks like it's a haphazard rectangular box that went underneath the road. But it's a historic stone culvert. It's not, it's chiseled and everything. So,
I love your example, because just to remind people, it's not just, you know, houses or groups of houses or downtowns that can be eligible, but, you know, industrial and other structural parts of our built landscape can be eligible for the state or national register as well. Just, are you saying that you made the connection between Jim Garvin, architectural historian Jim Garvin's thematic work and your individual structure, that you know it's eligible for the National Register, or you're wondering if it is?
So what happened is I emailed Tanya a couple pictures because Conservation Commission found it. And there was an issue with DOT with it. So we're trying to preserve it. And we weren't sure, like they thought it was just a beaver dam or something. And then we went to look at it, and it turns out it's this box culvert. I took photos and I sent them to Tanya, and she said, that's a stone, rectangular stone box culvert. And she sent me a link to Jim Garvin's paper that she said it's automatically eligible for the National Register. According to
the automatically word, do you have any feedback on that, DHR colleagues? Or maybe we
Yes.
need to investigate a little more.
I mean, I see something, you know, but it's automatically preserved is what it says, is they recognize it as a historic resource, is what the Jim Garvin paper said.
I think we might have to look into that a little more, because usually the thematic or context papers are to give us information to evaluate things individually. So that paper may have a series of what we call character defining features. And if the box culvert checks those off, then we would consider it eligible. But without an official evaluation from us, I would be hesitant to say it's automatically eligible based on the information. That being said, there also is a big difference between being eligible for listing on the National Register and being listed to the National Register. And the eligibility is just the baseline that folks use when they're doing reviews for things. And then the listing is just following through with the paperwork, basically.
You want to talk a little bit more about that, related to what attendees might come up against, whether there's a highway widening or federal money being used on something that's considered eligible, or they're trying to get to LCHIP in time for the deadline, the matching grant program for historic preservation. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Real quick first though, Wendy, if you want to get into the weeds about that, you can email Megan or me and we can help you sort out what's going on.
Thanks, George. Yeah.
Can somebody send me Megan's email then? I'm not sure I had the right.
It's going to be in my follow-up to everybody.
So eligibility for listing in the National Register or State Register for that matter is different than the final listing. Megan in her slides talked about the determination of eligibility committee that we have here. And so we meet every other week and we review the forms that we get in, and we as a committee make a decision as to whether a resource is eligible for listing in the state and or national register. And that eligibility comes into play with federal reviews, things like highways or other federal projects, but also with your grant opportunities. So I mean, Megan reviews a ton of eligibility and state register things for folks who are interested in LCHIP or other grant programs.
I'm actually going to survey that box culvert. I was doing the cellar holes, so I've done like, I don't know, 13 or 14 cellar holes. And Tanya said it's along the same thing. I can use my same form and everything and go ahead and survey it. And I send it to her, and she, there's like a form, and you got to make a topo map and all that stuff. So I know how to do that. I'm going to survey it just so that we can get it into the state inventory. So
Perfect.
the inventory, and then that might get the ball rolling, that then I can maybe see if it's eligible.
Perfect.
You know, it's helpful for us to be able to say, okay, here's this thing that, you know, it's a history mystery in a way. Like, I love using that term, but we had no idea it was there. I mean, a beaver dam was surrounding the whole thing, and lo and behold, here is this thing nobody knew was there, and it dates back to the 1700s. That just blows my mind. It just blows my mind. So we're trying to do everything we can to make sure that people understand the importance of it. And Tanya did say that it's significant because they are so rare. People just don't even know what they are. They just plow them under and develop over them, and, you know, it's kind of a lucky find.
Great.
Yep.
So I just want to make sure I get to some of the chats that Maggie just helped me make sure I was looking at. The first is, would someone outline the grant opportunities available to individual home or commercial building owners for their properties listed on either the state or national register? So let's talk a little bit about grants and fundraising. I guess I also just wanted to say we cast this as Preservation Planning 101, and we talked about kind of 3 big concepts. There certainly are many other tools and strategies around proactive preservation planning. I am going to send you a link to this whole chapter of the Preservation Alliance's handbook that has nice little snippets about other tools. And my office, Preservation Alliance's office, and DHR are certainly happy to have follow-up conversations with people about those other tools. Or if we had a quick one, maybe we could do it during this hour. And then maybe we have time for Emmett, maybe we don't, but I'll make sure to share that link. So that's what I was trying to accomplish. Wanted to share that with you before we got to this answer. So individual homeowners and commercial building owners. Maybe Beverly, in a minute, do you want to answer the individual homeowner question? And first we'll go to commercial. I would start by asking Brandee just to make the connection again for folks with the program that you run at DHR, the investment tax credit, and then I'll try to jump in with some other examples and then shift it to Beverly for individual homeowners.
Sure. So for commercial building owners, there aren't a ton of grant opportunities. Those are pretty rare to come by. But the Federal Rehabilitation Investment Tax Credit Program is the most utilized one for commercial building owners. And the way that that program works is that, for example, and this is all, there's a lot more kind of details to it, but ballpark, you spend $100,000 rehabbing your building, doing improvements and things like that. If they meet a certain set of criteria that are reviewed and approved by our office and then the National Park Service, you can get a 20% tax credit of those expenditures. So if you spend $100,000, you can get a $20,000 tax credit. And that's a credit that comes right off of the amount of taxes owed. It's not a deduction. So that can be a significant chunk of change for folks. Often too, we see nonprofits that will create a for-profit LLC or partner with a tax credit syndicator, and they can go ahead and sell those $20,000 worth of credits since they maybe can't use them since they're a nonprofit, but they can sell them and get $15,000 cash for them, something like that. It's a lot more complicated, but that's the basic idea. So in addition to that, so that's the federal program, and I'm happy to talk to anybody who has questions about that. If you have folks in town, property owners, developers, anything like that, please send them my way. I think it's a great program, and I'm really trying to kind of boost it here in the state. In addition to that, there's also RSA 79E, 79E. D is the barns, right? 79E, and that is state enabling legislation. So if a community has adopted it, it can be a property tax freeze for a certain amount of time based on what kind of work that you did to the property. So both of these programs generally require either eligibility for listing to the National Register, or in the case of the federal tax credit, it has to be listed eventually to the National Register. So that's part of the process as well. We oversaw quite a few projects in the last few years. They led to a lot of new housing units and new commercial spaces and things like that. So that's mostly what folks are looking at when it comes to a commercial use building.
Thanks for that. And for the community, nonprofit, and municipal owned buildings, as we already alluded to a couple of times, it could be a commercial building, but owned by a municipality or nonprofit. LCHIP, the Land and Community Heritage Investment Program, is a huge boost for the state. A Moose Plate that's run out of the Division of Historical Resources office is good for municipally owned buildings. There's kind of an alphabet soup of projects that maybe have a public-private partnership to them. Some of that's on our website. I can send you the link. It really is usually use-driven. You know, if it's housing or has certain community development goals, potentially there are other incentives. And we're always happy to talk to people about the individual case. It really depends on the ownership, what the use plan is, what the dollars look like, things like that. Beverly, you also got it. I'm sorry.
I just want to, you made a good point, Jennifer. I want to clarify when I say, I really should say income producing buildings, not commercial buildings.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Yeah. So I mean, B&Bs, rental apartments, all that stuff. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. And then Beverly, we also got just a second question. You got a lot of calls about farms and barns too. So sources of dollars, maybe, you know, touch on the tools too, and maybe circle back to 79E, or I can, but
well, right. I was going to say, for the private homeowner, there's very little funding except for the two programs that Brandee just talked about. If they're income producing, you could get that federal tax rehab. If, for example, a B&B or some other income producing, and you're on the state the National Register. But other than that, unfortunately, for private homeowners, there's not really much out there. There is also the Barn Tax Incentive Program, which is 79D. You don't have to be on the state or National Register for that, but that is a reduction in tax on the barn itself, not your whole property, but just the barn. Anywhere from 25 to 75% off. And that is a discretionary preservation easement that the town, your select board has to vote on. The town does not have to vote on whether or not it can even be used in your town. It's just up to the select board when you apply. So that's 25 to 75% off on the taxes on your barn itself. And that is a minimum of a 10-year preservation easement with you agreeing to maintain the property.
I would just add to the mix. We've only seen this a few times so far in New Hampshire, but like conservation deals, community conservation deals where conservation rights are purchased, the Preservation Alliance has been part of a couple of conversations and 2 executed deals where kind of the preservation rights were purchased, the preservation protections were purchased but in a community fundraising effort. So that's just one other way in rare cases, but maybe growing cases, that different kinds of private-public partnerships can be met in a way to help, you know, a really important project in town. So I think I've got the chats. We have a few more minutes left. Does anybody have questions about State National Register survey or where this other conversation has gone, other kinds of planning tools? I will send you this follow-up material. Do you raise your hand if you want to take a quick look at Emmett? And Brandee, do you mind doing it? Do you want to do it? About half the people. You know what?
All right, I'm just gonna take a quick second to log on before I share my screen.
Okay, and I'm actually gonna sign off, and then whoever wants to stay on can stay on. Let's do it that way, right? Is that okay? So I'm gonna close the bigger group meeting, but stay on if you want to look at Emmett. Just want to thank you for participating very much. The dialogue and the questions really hopefully made it useful for you. Hopefully you're taking away a couple of new nuggets and a little inspiration of a project you might want to do for your own property or in town. Hopefully you have some ideas of who else you can turn to get advice along the way. I'm going to be sending out an email, as I said, that's got a bunch of links to some of the topics we talked about. It also has a short survey. It just takes a couple minutes. Hope you'll fill it out so you can give us some feedback about this session and other ideas other topics you might want us to work on. Please join, be a member if you're not already of the Preservation Alliance to help sustain our work like this. And again, thanks for all the work you're doing in your communities. Stay safe, be well, and stay on if you want to look at Emmett.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen real quick. Okay, so Emmett has it's a login system. I already logged in, so you won't see that landing page, but this is where you get once you log in. So as you can see here on the map, we've got a bunch of dots and some lines and all kinds of stuff here. So each of these points are properties that we either have in our inventory or state or national register. So you can do a search two different ways. You can search if you know the name of, something in the name of the property or the address, or if you already know the inventory inventory number that we assigned to it. The other way that you can search is by map. And for this, you can just put in an address and then that will bring up a point. Is there an address off the top of your head you can think of? So you can either put an address in or you can do this and just zoom in. Yeah. So we'll do that. So we can see here that we've got a couple of these polygons. These are areas that have been surveyed. And then these dots are all individual properties. So if I zoom in here, we end up over Center Harbor right here, right? So each of these are inventoried properties. And then once you click on one of these dots, it'll pull up some basic information. You can go over here and nope, sorry, my bad. Go down here, details. And this will show you what kind of information we have on the building, along with any actual forms or documents that we have. So here we do have an inventory form. This one seems, oh, it's just documenting that it's been demolished, but that's good information to know. So that is the basics of how it works. If I had known, I would have prepared some actual properties to show you. I apologize, but it's a great tool, and as you can see, we have a lot of room to grow as far as completing our inventory in the state. So I'm going to stop that and pop back over. So if anybody has questions about that, there is a link to the program right on the DHR website, and you can get more information about it and get in contact with Tanya, who is our administrator for it.
Good. Well, thanks to Megan and Brandee. I didn't thank you in the other closeout. I really appreciate the partnership and you guys presenting today and being here for the questions. So should we sign off? Keep up the good work, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.